President Francois Hollande's number of unemployed is now close to reaching 3 million people. But the outlook for young adults is looking particularly bleak, not just here in France, but across Europe as youth unemployment figures continue to soar. The Hollande government is offering to pay most of the salaries of 100,000 young people hired next year in the hopes of driving down the unemployment rate. The pressure is on as the French leaders' approval ratings are beginning to tumble. Yet French employers have criticised the plan for being far too restrictive and not including, for example, the commercial sector. But the question is President Hollande and his fellow political leaders across Europe up to the job to restore economic security, or is this to be a lost generation? With me in the studio is Thomas Klau, the Paris Bureau Chief of the European Council on Foreign Relations, LEVY-LANG, the chairman of Les Echos, who also sits on many boards here in France. Later, a little bit, we're going to have Itai, CELLIER, a young entrepreneur who's here in Paris and has apparently having to let go of 2 of his young employees in the weeks ahead. And also Thomas HOUDAILLE from the Europanova think tank. But first we're going to head to just outside of Paris, where the business lobby group, MEDEF, has been meeting this Wednesday. Joining me now is France 24's business editor, Marcus Carlson. Marcus, thanks for joining us. First of all, what I'd like to talk to you about is I understand that the Prime Minister, for the first time, actually addressed this meeting. In terms of what the Hollande government has come out with, what has been the response from the members there at this gathering? Do they believe the government is actually up to the job of tackling unemployment?
Well, first of all, yes, it was a very symbolic speech here by the Socialist Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault earlier, because, as you say, he's the first Socialist Prime Minister to address this forum, which brings together businessmen and women from around France. When it comes to that confidence issue, whether or not they're actually confident that the French government is taking the unemployment issue in the right direction, well, I suppose the jury's still out on that, because we heard today in response to the government's plans to hire or to get companies to hire 100,000 young people that, yes, it is a good idea and it is commendable that they are coming out with actions at this stage, but that it's not enough. Why, for instance, not lower the hiring costs for all companies waiting to or looking to hire at this stage? Also, companies, of course, they're putting the finger on the problem when it comes to labor costs. They want labor costs to come down here in this country. When you look at the so-called unit labor cost, for instance, in the Eurozone, the French unit labor cost is the second highest in the Eurozone after Belgium, and that, they say, is making France less competitive, and that is what the government should be looking at.
Marcus, thanks for that. LEVY-LANG, do you agree with what MEDEF has been saying about Hollande's initiatives?
Yes, I think the initiative is probably useful, and I don't think there was any choice for the government, which had to do something quickly, and they wanted to do something quickly.
But is it enough?
Certainly not. Certainly not. I'm not even sure that it's very effective, because these jobs are really for 3 years, and depending on what kind of jobs is selected, they may or may not become permanent jobs, which is basically the purpose. So it's a signal, I think, more than a cure. The real problem is how to get companies to hire again. And the cost of labor is one of the problems. The other problem, which is very often mentioned, is the lack of flexibility of employment contracts. As you may know, we have a 3,200-page long labor law. The code of the labor code is a huge monument. So it means that apart from the fact that it's not, well, it's always true in Europe. In most of Europe it is true, but in France I think it is especially true. It's very difficult to lay off someone if you have, let's say, fewer orders in the business. And it's very complicated also just to manage people, to manage staff. So we all know cases of small businesses or very small businesses which are deliberately holding, stopping or not hiring because they just cannot handle it. So that's one of the problems. This is well known. The real question is that I think a socialist government can change things because people will trust that they can be done in a fair way, which is the real question.
Thomas HOUDAILLE, do you think a socialist government is the one that can change the mindset?
I agree what was just said before about the capacity probably of the socialist government to be, to have more leverage to move things than the previous government. But time will tell. I think the challenge is very important, and if we consider that unemployment it's a French problem, but unemployment for young people is also a very European problem, and it's linked to growth, of course, and we know that the growth issue is linked to the European capacity to produce another economical environment. So there is, of course, specific French issues about flexibilities, but it's also the same in Greece, for instance, where when you want to start a company it takes 6 months, and other kind of regulation that could help entrepreneurship. But the overall environment is the European economical stability and perspective, and that's the issue that is not tackled today enough by, in particular, the French government.
Itai, CELLIER, you're a young entrepreneur who I understand is having to let go 2 of your employees because of changes to government laws. Could you just give me a little bit of background as to what's happening with your business and how tough it is, as far as you see it, in terms of operating in France?
Well, I can give you a first-hand testimony basically on what actually is going on in small businesses. Currently I have 2 students working for me. Okay, both of them are stagiaires, they call them in France, or interns. One of them is working for the past 2 years. He's an architecture student, and the second is a very talented young salesperson. I wanted to hire them in long-term CDI contract, which is like a permanent contract. Yeah, permanent contract that has like no definite end. So what I just did, I called my accountant to ask exactly what were the modalities. There used to be some kind of a special scheme for those kind of cases. If it was the first employment of a person, we had like virtually no taxes. I mean, reduced taxes to pay as the company. I mean, as the company owner. And now I unfortunately discovered that it's no longer available. So it means that the cost of hiring these said persons is going to be very high. So we are now trying to find out, maybe do a very short-term 3 months contract, and maybe later on, if things will change, we might hire them on long term. But it's seriously very, very hard. I mean, we kind of have the sentiment as if instead of helping us hiring talented young people, they're just like not putting sticks in our like barring the way. It's just like a...
Are you confident that this government will be able to change things for a person like you to employ more people?
Personally, I don't see how they're going to do that. I mean, for me, the only thing that could actually work is reduce the amount of money that we have to pay as employers to the state because we hire people. I mean, we are now setting a new office in Manchester in the UK. I just inquired about labour costs. If I want to pay somebody £1,000 in the UK, I basically have to pay 1.2, I mean, £1,200. If I want to pay 1,000 euros to someone in France, I have to pay about 1,000, I have to multiply it by 72 or 82, something like that. So it's around 1,800 and
so in other words, it's much more expensive.
So it's much more expensive actually to hire people in France, whereas in Germany, in the UK, in maybe not in Belgium, because it's like Belgium and Denmark, I think are the 2 other countries that are almost as high as France, or as high as France. I don't have the exact measures, but basically it's much cheaper to hire people outside France than rather in France. So we are starting to think of how we're going to do. My company is a startup high-tech company, okay? So we're 12 persons, we're 12 people, but we are already spread on 3 countries. I had to offshore into China and India. Being a small company as I am, I'm not like Renault or Total. I'm a small company and I have to offshore, or else I just can't get ends meet.
And a reminder of unemployment figures from July that came out earlier this week here in France. And according to those figures, there are now 2.99, nearly 3 million people registered as job seekers, an increase of 1.4% on the previous month, and an increase of 8.5% over a year. And it's the highest level since June 1999. Now, Thomas Klau, every government comes up with some sort of initiatives as such. Do you see this current initiative as just being another band-aid, another plaster?
I think we've got to distinguish between this initiative, which is a short-term initiative, which is meant at least to give a sort of signal of hope and indeed facilitate the entry into the first job for a whole generation or part of a generation of people with no diploma in many cases, no previous job experience, and as such it can make sense. But of course it doesn't tackle, as was said previously, the more fundamental problem of unit labour costs and the lack of flexibility. And what France still hasn't, I think, lived up to collectively, and that goes for certainly for the Parti Socialiste, is to face fully the fact that the global environment has radically changed over the last 10 years. And that for many jobs, and we just had a very striking example, we're no longer just looking at a European playing field, we're looking at a global playing field. And this is a process of adaptation which is painful for the old rich economies in Europe, but they need to face up to facts, and France still hasn't done that fully enough.
Thomas Itai, do you think that's a fact, that France has yet to face up to the reality of the world marketplace?
Oh yes, definitely. You know, I think we're still living in the previous century, and actually all that has been discussed during the presidential campaign was a sign for me of this denial of reality. But, you know, I think that's also how politics exist, and there has to be some pressure. There is some economical pressure now for things to change. I hope the wall we're facing will oblige the government to take radical measures to modernize the country, give flexibility, more reform about competitivity, and also all the other dimension that I was mentioning concerning growth at a European level, because we can't consider France has the solution to its problem. We don't have French problem, we have European problems, and we have European solutions.
Andre, it's a cultural issue here in Europe, isn't it? It's becoming a real trend for young people these days to sort of string together a series of temporary contracts, or CDDs as they're known, or internships. And why is it that companies are not brave enough to hire young people on a permanent basis?
Well, there are maybe 2 reasons. One is, which was mentioned, is that you want to test them first, which I think is a normal reason why you want to test people before you hire them. The other one is that it's very difficult to fire them, to let them go. So you want to make sure, if you hire someone, that you may be hiring that person for life. There's very few cases where you can know that you're going to hire somebody for life. So that's the flexibility question. On the cost question, I should mention, I think, that the program, the socialist program, as it was presented, includes the transfer of some of the costs of healthcare, for instance, from salaries to taxes, which actually, today, the very high cost, which was mentioned, you pay someone 1,000, it actually costs 1,800, and actually the person will probably get only 800, so 900. So it's very, very high. Part of this extra cost is there to finance healthcare. Part of it is for retirement, and part of it is for unemployment insurance, right? So the idea is that to shift part of it, especially the health part, which is not connected to work, if you wish, to shift it to taxes. And that was the plan of the previous government, which tried to shift that to the value-added tax. That was cancelled because the value-added tax is paid by everyone, and it's something which is supposed to be regressive, you know. So now the idea, I guess, from what was said publicly, is to shift part of this cost to other taxes, basically income tax, if you wish, which is good in a way because it will reduce the unit cost, but we just shift the problem to another problem. Now, to come back to your point, the cultural issue is not there. The real cultural issue is what was mentioned before, that we have to realize as a country that things have changed. And therefore we have to change some of the rules of our basic welfare system.
Itai, what do you want from this government?
Well, basically, I'd rather the government wouldn't tax us that much, and just like, because basically what happens today, my associate, she passes, I'd say, nearly 70% of her time, instead of doing marketing, which she's actually learned in a very fine French school, she's actually making what we call dossier over dossier over dossier. It means like we are trying to apply to governmental aids to cover up for all the taxes that we're actually paying. So it's a huge, tremendous amount of red tape that we actually have to, if we won't do it, we basically just, I mean, a small company like ours with the new technology will basically just die. So we have to apply to all those governmental or European aids, one after the other. These things take tremendous amount of time. We have to prove that we are innovators, that we are new, that we are young, that we want to employ people, and so that we can get money that we have to go to give back to all those institutions later on. So if they just cut the expenses that we have to pay today as taxes, I think we wouldn't be needing all this wasted time, because basically we just use the government today as a resource instead of actually producing, actually innovating, doing things. We actually are bound to understand how the system works and try to manipulate it at best to get a little bit of money back.
Itai, CELLIER, just hold that thought because it's time now for a break. Join us in a moment for the second part of our France 24 debate.